Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out insightsinsound.com for a full list of our podcasts and YouTube series.
My guest is Paula Salvatore. She is, well, what are you now? Because, well, she has been for many, many years the studio manager.
VP. I made it to VP.
Yes, well, you started as studio manager, right?
Manager, yes.
I'll clarify this in a minute.
Okay.
But you made your way all the way up to VP. You made it to 33 and a third years with the company. And now you're starting your own thing. So we're going to get into that in a minute.
Okay.
But you started out as, did you start as a studio manager or did you start, how did you actually come in?
At Kaplan, I started as a studio manager.
Okay,
Yeah,
what's your history before that?
Studio A, so they wanted someone to break it in.
So what's your musical history and your technical history? I want to start there. Yeah. Well, because you obviously know enough technical stuff to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk.
Fake the talk and hug my way through it. So I started at Kendon in 78.
Wow.
And how I got into Kendon, because I had no record company experience. I was a seamstress. I was trying to get in rock and roll and make clothes for bands. And then I got a job in a men's clothing store on Sunset. It turns out that guy that hired me became Tom Petty's fashion designer. All his suits. Yeah. So
that's an interesting way in.
Yeah. So that's the only way, because I had wanted a sewing machine. No, I wanted a piano since I was 9. My dad got me a sewing machine. So
was this one of those, you're a girl, you have to learn to sew things?
Yeah. I don't know. He just couldn't afford a piano. So, but when the time I was 17, I did get one.
Sewing machine. It's kind of an odd, I would think I can't afford a piano. Here's the guitar.
Yeah, here's a flute.
Yeah, something.
I don't think he wanted to steer me in music business. I think he had his fears about it.
Yeah, it sounds like there was some ulterior motive here. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So then when I was around 17, 18, I figured, you know what? I'm going to have to work my way into music business. So I found a school that was right next to Berkeley, School of Music, for fashion design. And I said, Dad, I found a school for fashion design. He's like, oh, good. And I figured I'll just get along with musicians and eventually make their costumes for bands, which I did a little bit. And I went to 2 years and then came straight to California and walked around with my portfolio of little art sketches and what I can do. But I had no sewing machine, so I talked them into hiring me and giving me their sewing machine to use. So I did that for a while, but then I got tired of sewing. But everywhere I went, it was rock and roll. On my way to California, just ran into people who worked for the Stones. So we went to this concert twice in Boston, twice in New York, and then they were in LA. And then I got with those guys sewing. And then I was working for this girl that did clothes for the group Queen Angel, which is, I found out later, an Eddie Kramer produced band.
I love
Crazy.
It. So basically, you had all these things drawing you into music.
Yeah, it was always
this happened to me too. I understand.
I worked in a clothing store in La Cienega, and Grace Slick came in. So I'm like, it's just always going to rock and roll. So I was.
You got the message.
Trying so that So I ended up going to work at Music Plus right on Ventura and Lowell Kinney.
Oh yeah.
And it was in the late '70s, and Toto was just forming their band. All the people from CBS Radford could come over. Every musician lived in Studio City, it seemed. And the key albums.
Because it was cheap.
Yeah. And the key albums for $4.99 that I was privy to selling was Saturday Night Fever, Star Wars, and Asia. So everybody was coming in, going crazy,
Yeah.
I worked for them. Then I met a rock and roll musician and started going in with him, and he took me into working for him a little bit, so I left. And then it was like, said his mother wanted the job back. So, because his mother was doing, it was simple things, but I was going on the road a little, but so it was like, something's not right here.
Yeah,
so
that sounds like a lot of psychological stuff in there.
Yeah, where's my retirement? So I went back to Music Plus and told them that I need my job back. I got laid off Anyway,
I was seduced by a rock and roller.
yes, and I gave him 3 months to think about it, but anyway, to think about me quitting my job. You know, I'm going to quit my job.
Right.
You know, get it?
Right.
So anyway, and when I went back there, this guy that worked there said, "You should work at a recording studio. I know this girl that just quit Kenton." He said, "Just today at noon," and it was like 1. And I said, "So what did she do?" He said, "She was in traffic." And I said, "Oh." So I looked up in the phone book, but first I called my good friend that I met in LA, Vinny Poncia, who I met him at a softball game with the girls that I sewed with, and he's from Rhode Island. So he took to me. It's like, let me put you under my wing, and he was doing Melissa Manchester, he was doing Ringo, but I was hanging around with him and his friends, which were James Newton Howard, and he was just doing, you know, he's amazing.
And he just basically, you were like the kid sister.
He wrote,
yeah.
He Made Me Feel Like Dancing.
Ooh,
And other songs with the Ringo.
That's some
Ringo
good mailbox money right there.
Oh my.
Oh yeah.
Oh, he's got the mailbox.
Yeah.
And he also, because in the 80s he wrote "I Was Made for Loving You" with Kiss and produced them.
Okay. Yeah.
And,
yeah. That's
and that was
a
just
lot
featured,
of mailbox money.
It was just featured in The Fall Guy about
Wow.
8 times.
Okay.
Yeah. So we love Vinny.
Yep.
It's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Vinny.
Happy birthday,
I know
Vinny.
you watch. So I called him on the phone. I said, "What do I got to know to work in a recording studio?" He goes, 24-track Dolby. He goes, "I don't know." And I said, "That's good. Okay, fine." So I called him up and I said, "I'm looking for a job in a recording studio. I'm in traffic, and I know 24-track Dolby." And they said, "Well, someone just quit." And I said, "Well, I'm in the neighborhood." I just pushed my way. I said, "I'll be right over." And I came in and they introduced me to the studio manager, Althea Matt, this lovely woman that was a little more serious than the guy on the phone, and she interviewed me. And I had, sewing, work with rocks. I said I worked with Vinny, production assistant. I made it up.
So you talked your way into a job.
I talked my way, and she said
that is so rock and roll.
And she said, there's a lot of girls that have worked for record companies. They did some layoffs. This was 78. And there were some layoffs. She goes, "But you don't have any experience with, working with these 2 guys, And I said, I have no bad habits. I'm completely trainable, and those other girls are going to give you attitude. And she went,
Ooh.
"Okay." She goes, "Go talk to the VP." And I went through the red tape with him, and she goes, "Go back and talk to Althea, because it's down the block at Kendon."
Yeah, of course.
And they said, "Okay, we're going to give you a chance."
So how old were you at this point?
Oh, something in my early 20s. Yeah.
I mean, because
I had guts.
I'm impressed that not only you had guts, but you also knew how to advocate for yourself at an early age.
Yeah,
that's something that doesn't usually happen.
You know what it is? Because it's survival.
Yeah.
The more you have to survive, like if I didn't make money, I can't make rent. I'm not living off anybody. My dad was a kind of like, if you want a flight home, I'll pay for that. Plus he had 4 other kids, so I knew.
Yeah.
So it was
you figured it out early on.
Yeah. And I always say, once you sneak in, don't sneak out.
That's it exactly. And the thing is, it really is true. There's no going home.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who move back in with their parents, but for the most part,
I'd have to go all the way to Rhode Island. What am I going to do in Rhode Island?
Well, yeah. There's that, but there's also there's this mentality.
Yeah.
It's like
music
for me,
too. You're following music.
Yeah. For me, I knew that if I went back home, if I ever went back home, the relationship would be even worse than it had been for me to want to leave as a teenager. So. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, because I left when I was 18, but then after school I went home and I got a job making some show band outfits. But I figured I got to get out of here before I get a car, a job, or a baby.
Yikes.
Because that's what happens in your hometown.
Right, of course.
And they live through their kids. And I love everybody that's done that, and I think probably they have less stress. But you balance it out. Kids give you stress. But anyway, I had a lot of nieces and nephews to go visit. There was always a new baby.
Right.
So my mother didn't say, "Well, when are you going to have a kid?" She's like, "You don't have to." We were busy. So I got a chance to really go after, and I just love music so much. It's like if you're born with it and you just love it, you have to follow it.
And you gravitate towards it.
And that's what Tony Berg said. He said, you don't take this if you're half-hearted. You can only do these jobs if you must do these jobs.
That's it exactly, and that's how we survived, because we knew that one way or another this was going to be what we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
Exactly.
for a woman coming up in those days, it's like.
Oh, we're going to get into that in a
Yeah,
minute.
I mean, and that's what God bless. So I was in a year at Kendon, and who comes walking in with all her glory and beauty is Rose Mann. And I was sitting there, and I just go, what is that woman? And we used to sit at a round table, and I used to just watch her, and I used to like, oh my God, she's amazing. She gets, like, her talk and everything, like, she made me cool. And she used to say, do as I say, not as I do, because she got away with anything. And I'm like, she's got the power of the relationships, and that's what it's all about. She taught me really well and became really wonderful friends. We went through both a hard time together, and she ended up staying in my unit her first time in the Valley, and then, I was going through a tough breakup and stuff, so stuff a little weird. So I decided to go back into the fashion world and work at the Mart for 6 months. Get away from music, get away from everything.
Okay.
And I had a friend that was from Rhode Island and Boston that came out here and had an Indian import clothing place. So I went there and I said, oh, these people are nutty. I'd rather be around nutty musicians than nutty women in fashion.
Yeah, because nutty women in fashion usually have like 12 cats and
something about it.
Uh-huh.
And it's easier. I'm sorry, but it's easier to tell a guy what to do, especially when you're younger and in charge.
Let's get into that a little bit, because you and you mentioned Rose, and I adore Rose. And by the way, Rose is one of the few former studio managers who still has not been interviewed by me. You hear that, Rose?
I didn't say.
I love Rose.
I do too.
She has. I don't think she wants to.
No,
She doesn't like to talk about herself.
She's not ready to talk.
No, she doesn't like to talk about herself.
Yeah.
But
She's
I
very
know
humble.
that but you mentioned Rose, and I think especially you and Rose, even more than a lot of and we have a lot of really wonderful, amazing, powerful women in our circle.
Oh, they're wonderful.
But you and Rose in particular,
you
have been in certain ways like completely bulletproof, and it's like, what do they call it? Velvet glove?
Yeah, you know what?
Iron fist?
Yeah.
And I am so, I have always been so impressed with the both of you, because you are like, you do not take any shit, and yet you are like some of the nicest people in the world. It's like, you managed to have that balancing act.
Oh, yeah,
and that's all psychology.
Yeah. Oh, good to know.
Well, come on. Yeah.
I mean, my mother was a lot like that. My dad was the most smarter one and stuff, but my mother was very hospital loving, and I think that's Italian in me. But also, I hung out with the guys in Rhode Island that don't take any, it either. And they made me tough. And one is my old boyfriend, Steve DeMeo, that I met at 15. He was older, and we taught me how to sneak in all the concerts.
Yep.
So I took that, like he said, I taught you too well, and now you're gone. I went to Boston, and I'm in LA, and then he saw me on the Grammys once. He's like,
damn it.
Yeah, damn it. But but it is street smartness,
it is.
And also not being overreactive to everything that happens. That's the thing about just keeping you cool.
Yeah, but there's also, we're in a weird little industry, because we have like equal parts of tech and creative, and it's like left brain and right brain.
Yes.
But it's so weirdly balanced that you really have to be fluid.
Oh,
you have to really be able to very chameleon-esque, and
totally.
You do that a lot, and I can only imagine, especially once you came over to Capitol.
Well, Jeff Minnick was the head guy, and he got me the job there, and he is like one of the smartest guys I ever met. And he was like, he would explain things because I'd always say, what are we doing? Like, I got to explain it on the phone, and I got to suggest things, and he'd tell me about what it actually in layman's terms and stuff like that. So I would just say, I'm the brains, he's the looks, because so he's the kid. But he was on the cutting edge when Studio A got first built, and said, we have a new room, when we need it, we need someone with a personality to get people in, you know. So I was like, I spent the last 9 years at Sound City with rockers.
Okay, now we're skipping around here a little bit. I want to follow your timeline a little bit, because you started out at Kendon, which had the reputation of being a little crazy. Yeah. You know, and then from there you went to Sound City?
Well, I went to the clothing mart, and I went to an AES show. So always go to your AES show, because I was in the fashion design downtown. I hiked over to the Hilton where they had an AES, and I saw Gary Lubo, rest his soul. I saw this engineer that I knew from Kendon, and he said, they need you at Sound City. And I said, where's that? You know, so I went. I was on my way to Sound City for an interview, and a new song, Rick Springfield, Jesse's Girl. And I said, oh, this is great. What a great song. And then my boss said, you know, Joe and Tom, they said, we manage Rick, so we're getting some money in. So they gave me a job. But it was just 4 to midnight. So, and that's how I started at Kendon, 4 to midnight.
Well, those are the working hours.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main shift.
So basically at Kendon, then I eventually went to 11, 12, 1, because rock and roll didn't start till 2, and I'd be there till 2 sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
Because, you know, I was like, I think I'll go home, or I'll go in the studio and listen to Dio. Like, it was my TV, it was my record.
Well, and you know, that's funny, because I had this conversation earlier with another friend of mine. You know, we would go and stay in the studio even when we weren't working.
No,
it was like, you know,
it's addictive.
With me, same thing. You know, Cherokee. When I got my job at Cherokee, I lived a block and a half from the studio.
Oh, yes, that's lucky.
Yeah, I just happened to get a job at the studio, like right near my apartment. I could literally walk to work.
How nice.
But the weird thing was, it's like, I just stayed. You know,
no.
If I wasn't working that day, I came in to see if there was a room empty so I could play. You know.
Yeah, no, it's really kind of a sickness.
It is. Because
I thought, you know, since I've been gone from Capitol, and Capitol closed, in, you know, for a little time, and everything's gone. It'll come back, of course, but I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to Jones. I mean, I've been in recording studios for, so almost 3. Oh, yeah.
Long time.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah.
Someone else do the math, and I love it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just like I feel at home with stuff around me like this.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you know.
And I found a way to, because I've been heavy networking. You never stop, you know.
No,
you never stop. Making friends, going to things, finding out about things, and my friends have been so gracious. They coming over. And
that's what we do.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of it, is the social aspect of it. Now, you never had any musical aspirations, right?
Yes.
Or did you?
Yes, at 9.
At 9, okay.
When I asked my dad for piano, and he said we can't get one in the house, so
right, okay. But once you started working in studios.
Well, here's what happened. So they got a piano, and my sister was going to take lessons. She was 9. I don't know what happened to me. Maybe they didn't get through to them. I love my mom and dad. So they said, we have a piano now. And I go, now? Like, I'm 17 and I'm going out. And they're like, well, you could take lessons. And I'm like, no, I'm busy. And so I went to, while I would come home and play a little, like, by ear. I had an ear for it, you know. So then, but I had already said I'm going to Boston, right? So I'm in my second year. I stayed there in the summertime in Boston. I talked the school into giving me a job and letting me live in a dorm on Comm Ave.
Just because you didn't want to go home?
No, because I got a job. And I told them the whole purpose of us going to college is to get a job. And you're telling me I got to quit my job to go home? I said that to the dean, and he's like, no one lives in the dorms. I got 3 other guys to do it too. He said, no students live in the dorms during the summer. And I said, well, that's a bad rule. And then I think I pressed on him, and he said, okay.
You know, that's so funny, because I did the same thing. It's like, you know, because that's who we are. We question. It's like, it's always been done this way. Why? You know, and that's just it. If you're persistent enough with why, eventually they say, okay, fine.
Yeah,
you know?
it's a little pushy. But more kind of innocently pushy.
Right.
And he finally, I broke him. No kidding. So I said to my mom in my second year, because only 2 years school, I know what I want to do, you know, because I got friends with BCN radio guys, Tommy and John, and I was all around music all the time. And I said, I know what I want to do, Mom. I'm going to come home and learn the piano. And then I'm going to start, because I'd write little songs here and there. And she said, oh, honey, we want to get a hutch, and we're going to sell it. And I said, don't sell it. She goes, well, no one's playing it. I go, because I'm not there. Mommy, they're going over here. She goes, no, we're going to get a hutch, which I inherited, of course. But anyway, I was like heartbroken, but I didn't want to be, I understood. So that summer, me and my friend Lucy, we went to LA. I figured I will go in search of a piano.
Okay.
I will go in search of a piano eventually. So I came out and I found out that Valley College had free classes. So I took reading, writing, classical guitar, because I could afford a $25 classical guitar.
Okay, yeah.
And singing, a little vocal. And I was on my way. And finally, I go, no one can stop me because I'm doing this myself.
Did you want to be a rock star, or?
Oh, I wanted to be Joni Mitchell, Bonnie Raitt.
Right. Okay.
Rita
It was that era.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a voice, but I was shy, so I never knew.
Okay.
I mean, I sing along with music, and I knew music, and I could play along with stuff. In fact, I tried to prove it to my father when I was 9. I said, name any song, and I had a little Magnus chord organ this big, and he said, something stupid. So I started playing it.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow. I'm like, but my dad was an artist, a hidden artist, but an insurance man, because kids.
So he listened to you pick out that tune, and he said,
oh,
this means you need a sewing machine. Wow. Okay, Dad.
Get her out of music.
Dad.
Yeah. You know what he said?
Dude, sorry.
You know what he said to me once before he passed away, later years, he said, I'm sorry. And I said, no, Dad. I said, well, just think, if I went out there to be a piano player and thing, chances of making it are very slim, and chances of being as in the studios as much as I was as a piano player, no.
Yeah.
So I got to sit in on the most amazing sessions in life.
And that's another thing that I think is really, really important here, is that you didn't try for one thing, have your eye on one thing, and if that didn't work, it's a failure.
I'm crushed.
Right,
and
exactly.
that's what I see with all the employees I've had growing up. It's like, and I tell even people in college, it's like, get the field's big. Go for the field of that nature.
Yep.
And then see what clicks for you, you know, because you want to be this guy, you might not, but if you close yourself off, you won't get anything.
And that's just it, because there's, if you have, and usually when we're young, when we're in our 20s, it's like that. There's one thing, and what I refer to as aperture blur. Like everything except that one thing is just blur. It's not important, right?
Right, yeah.
But it's like as you get older and you start discovering, not only are there 100 different things, but like for me, I always say, I'm an actor in short attention span theater, right? It's like I figure something out, and then I want to do something else. And so it's like it's difficult then, because like people say to you, well, what do you do? But they don't say it like that to me. They say, what do you do? Because there's so many different things that you want to do, and you've obviously done this same thing, because you managed to adapt to all these different things.
A lot of adapting, and and a lot of faith. God help me with this now. It's like, and after 33 and a third years, it's like my whole identity is Capital. So now I have to it's like divorcing somebody that won't leave town. And that's famous. It's like, no, yes, he's fine.
No, I'm not mad.
No, I'm not. No.
I mean, I don't want to get into too much of that, because I know there's a lot of stuff.
I love the experience, and you know what? It's all storyline. Like
it is.
I really see. It's very serendipitous. It's very whimsical. It's like I like when things, and now new things are happening, and new opportunities, and it's just like, because I'm still there. I didn't fold up and pack up. Which that was easy in COVID to do.
And a lot of people did that, and a lot of people shut down. And it's funny, because I was doing the same thing during COVID. I think that was, in certain ways, that was a
test.
It was a reckoning
for
a lot of us.
It's
like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, I had been running a PR company for almost 30 years.
Oh, wow.
not 30 years. I started in '02.
Was it your own?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I basically, so when I came back from Germany, after BMG terminated things and all that, I came back from Germany. I did 2 years of designing control surfaces. For Tascam.
Wow, before their time.
Yeah, and then they laid me off, which was the best thing that could have happened. And somebody said to me, are you a writer? And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, always say yes, right?
Yes.
And I did that. It turned into a business. It turned into more work than I could handle. I ended up becoming the wayward home for all of the editors that were being laid off. I kept hiring them.
Oh my God.
And then
amazing.
I started doing video like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, the outgrowth of all this, right? But same thing. It's like, you know, when COVID hit, it was like, am I happy doing what I'm doing? Not really. So, you know, I decided to start doing something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that happened there was like, you know, we do a lot of stuff. We're all really good at a lot of stuff.
Well, when you're running like
know?
a studio, you're like a creative designer, an advertiser, you're all these little functions.
Yeah, exactly.
They wouldn't let me be a tech.
Well,
but I had the greatest tech team, you know.
You had a really great tech team, yes.
I just go in there to look and bother them and joke.
Well, there were a few studios that had great tech teams. Cherokee was one.
Kendon
Thank you.
Kendon
was
had
good.
Mom DeLogach and
Yep. A&M had Gary Meyerberg.
Yep.
And actually, I built a MIDI room.
And
I built a MIDI room for Herb. Gary brought me in to do that.
Oh, wow.
So upstairs.
You do that too?
Yeah, well, I did at the time. You know, again, it's like, you know, I can still do it, but, you know, do I want to do that now?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But, you know, not that it's even relevant anymore, but that's the kind of stuff. It's like you just try different things, don't you? You know?
Exactly.
And for you, it's been that way too. You really you kind of like defined the job.
Yeah, I think like Rose did that a lot. You know, with her.
Yeah. Oh, you and Rose both. You know.
Yeah, and the hospitality she did, and I'd always call. We talk a lot. You know, through those. Can't believe all the years we've known each other. You know, it's wonderful friendship. I love her so dearly, and she doesn't put up a crap, and she goes straight to the point.
Yeah.
With me, and
so do you.
So
do you. You know, and that's one of the things that I think has been one of the reasons that studio was so attractive was that, you know, people knew what they were getting. You know, and not just like, you know, like there's plenty of studios, and especially in the era that we came up, there were plenty of multi-room studios.
Yeah.
You know, that was the rule rather than the exception. A studio that only had one room was not even typical.
Right,
you know?
Right. Yeah, it wasn't on the map.
Yeah, and you know, I think I remember that there were a few studios around town that always, you know, people would make the rounds. It was you guys. It was Cherokee. It was Sunset.
Sunset Sound. Ocean
Lion
Way
Share
or
for a little bit.
Yeah, Lion Share.
Yeah.
I almost went to work with them too. Yep.
And you know,
that was a beautiful studio.
Yeah, that was a great studio.
But Sound City, you know, really got its own, and thank God for Dave Grohl. 25 years later, he puts a movie out. It's like, what? And I always said when I worked there, this should be a sitcom. That place was a definite sitcom.
Well, who was it that wrote that book? Mr. Bonsai?
Yeah.
That book,
yeah.
Studio Life, you know?
I saw that. Yeah. That's it.
And you know, it's like you read that and you think, well, this is my everyday life, you know.
Thank you. That's
know?
what I said. It wouldn't
it's like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be comedy?
Yeah.
Because this is like what I just went through last Thursday, you know.
Oh man, you know. So that's why I just love remembering the stories, and that's why I said if I wrote to write a book, it's good stories. It's fun stories.
It is.
I don't need to, you know, talk about.
Well, and that's you know, actually, I have considered that too. The idea of you know, we really should do a book on this stuff.
Yeah.
Because like, nobody would believe it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so for you, how did you end up at Capitol? Because that was you know,
okay. So I was
one day
at
to the next
Sound
kind of
City and it was 1990, and all I cared about was planning my first trip to Europe. So I was going to go there for 3 weeks. So I actually told Joe I'm taking a month, you know, and Joe said, you know, he had that old Neve 8028 that Dave bought, you know, but he kept saying, I said we got to get a big console. People always complaining and stuff. And he said, well, go take Rick Plushner from Nevo. And I said, why? You know, I'm not going to lie to him. So I called Rick out and I said, Joe wants me to take you to lunch. but we don't have any money, so come to lunch with me. He's like, come talk to me, right? So he said, okay. A few days later, this is around August, he calls me back and he goes, hey, do you mind if I take a couple guys from Capitol Studios? And I never even knew about Capitol Studios. I mean, I thought there must be one down there, but no one was talking about it. You know, it was kind of under low key. And I said, oh, okay, yes, I can't pay for those guys. He goes, no, I'm not taking that, you know. And so he brought Jeff Minnick and Charles Camelli, who were running the studio, and they had just finished building A, you know, the brand new, beautiful. And so we all went to lunch, and it was just fun, and I was telling the goofiest stories. I didn't know that they were looking at all. I just was like, blah, blah, blah.
You didn't know it was an
I was saying I go to work
yeah.
at 1 because I said rocks, and so they were laughing their head off. So I go back to work, and then Ellis calls me, Studio Furrow.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, oh, you know, did you hear that? And that I heard the Capitol was looking for a manager. And I said, what? I said, I just went to eat with those guys and they didn't mention it. I'm so insulted. Like, I was really insulted that they didn't even consider me. And then Jeff calls me and he goes, hi, we met. I'm like, yes. He goes, would you come to lunch again? Same place, Hamburger Hamlet on Van Nuys.
Okay.
I said, okay. And this time he brought David Lyman, who was the president of Capitol Records. And so, but we just went to lunch. We were talking. So I carried on with my same, you know, zaniness.
Your shtick, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that I
yeah.
just, because they weren't talking to me about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they only, you know.
But at this point, you knew they were looking for somebody.
Yeah, that's what I was going to see.
So I was going to see if
like,
did that color anything for you?
Well, I toned it down a little.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
But it's just like wasn't like if I was said, oh, they're going to interview for a job. If I was looking, I would have been more so moderate and
That's
stuff
why
that I
that's why I'm
wouldn't
wondering.
have been cracking jokes left and right.
Okay.
And the David Lyman, I kept him. He had the funniest laugh, so I kept him laughing. And I said the most silly things about working in the industry and everything. And then they left, and. Then Jeff called me and said, would you come over and look at the place? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll be over at 2 o'clock. I'm not doing anything in the morning. So I go over there, and he's like, what do you think? And they brought me to the E floor with Dave, and he's the E floor office. He's like, what do you think? And I said, it's very, very nice and big, but my stomach felt sick. Like it felt like, you remember when you're a kid and you stay at someone's house and you feel homesick? So I felt homesick for Sound City.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really a weird feeling, and I said, "Oh, yeah." I was almost like, "Can I go now?"
Really?
So, yeah, it was so. Studio A was so beautiful, and plus it was the tower, and I'm like, this, you know.
You couldn't see yourself there, or what?
I just felt like I said to Jeff, I said, you know, my personalities are kind of goofy sometimes. He said, we want that. We want what you got. I said, really? You know, because I didn't feel like, you know.
Well, but I could see that, though.
But he said, yeah. But that's the thing. The tower looks like that. We don't want someone to be like this. We want someone to say, come on in, you know, be friendly.
Right.
And he said, that's our problem, to get people in. So I said, oh, okay. So when Dave Lyman was up there and he said, you know, we want to offer you the job, and I said, I was like, thought I was going to get out of there, and he said, I said, okay, and he said, do you think you're going to be able to come to work at 9? And this is the VP asking me because I told him I go to work at like 1.
Right.
I said, well, I'm going to Europe, and the clock's are way ahead, so I'll practice, you know, getting up early, 8 hours. And he said, okay. And another thing, that it was August, it was like August, it was almost Labor Day. Mm-hmm. And they said, when could you start? And I said, October 15th. They're like, what? Like, it's like 2 months or a month and a half. And I said, well, I'm going to Europe, you know? And I mean it. I'm going to Europe. So anyway, they said, okay, well, wait. And I'm like,
whoa.
Honest to God. So I said, okay, I'll let you know. And then, you know,
so
Jeff.
You were really playing hard to get.
No, I wasn't even feeling that. I was naturally hard to get, I guess. I wasn't playing. I was like, what? And when Jeff called me late, he goes, what is, he goes, I worked at Sound City. You're never going to get, you don't even have a medical insurance. My dad is like, you need medical. My friend in Europe said, you can't come out if you don't take the job. And I'm like, I'm taking it. But I said, are you sure I'm ready for it? Like when I drove in there that day, when I went to Europe and came back and I drove in for my first day, I said like, Gidget goes to Hollywood. It just was like, so.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're corporate.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, so, and you know, I had met like Norberg. I went through the whole tour and Jay Benelucci and everybody looked really serious, you know.
Is Michael Frondelli there yet or not?
No.
Okay.
Jeff got Michael, he came in December. And
okay.
I just saw him at the Light Up the Blues thing. He's so dear to me.
I love Michael,
but he had just moved out and now Jeff got me and Jeff got him and then he became everybody's boss, you know, as director.
Yeah.
So, you know, but Studio A, we built that business. And the first thing that came in, you know, because on my roster was like things you mark. Meeting Paul McCartney was kind of at the top of the capital list.
Yeah.
Because I knew Sound City's Tom's daughter met him in the 80s, and I was so like, oh, you know. And so I was looking through the book, you know, I'm like, nothing, a mix, nothing. I'm like, oh my God, this place is so boring. That's what I'm thinking, because Sound City was so exciting, you know?
That's really funny. I mean, if you think about the fact that, I mean, yeah, it sounds boring, but on the other hand, this is capital. This is EMI. You think to yourself, this must be like, you know.
I kind of felt a little out of place, you know? It was like, what am I doing here? Like, how, you know, how did I get here, you know? And because it wasn't a quest, it just fell upon me. So, but I look through and I open a page that says Paul McCartney interviews in Studio A, the new studio, and I'm like, so I went and saw Jeff in the shop, and I said, I've noticed Paul McCartney in the book. Would he be coming in for that? And he goes, I believe so. I go, thank you. And then I ran into my room and screamed, you know, and it's so cute, so funny, because I was like, can I go down there? He's like, well, you're the manager, you know, just, and I went down to the studio, and Paul said, can I see the console? Because he had just bought a Neve console, the same one we had, you know. And so that was nice, and, you know, and then forever, you know, for 30 years, he was coming in and out. When Paul McCartney's in, it's very hard to work. It's very hard to concentrate.
It's funny. That's an interesting thing for both of us. You know, I always felt like I was really good with, you know, meeting rock stars, meeting famous people, you know. I mean, when I was 19, I ended up in San Francisco, and I fell in with a commune that was working with the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane.
You did that,
yeah. So, you know, it was like, I kind of felt like I had it down to be just like, you know, hey man, to whoever, right?
Right.
And then when I was working at Cherokee, Ringo walked in one day, and I did the same thing. Was you know, and you freeze, because there are certain people who just represent that, you know, that to you somehow. But I think, you know, it's a testament to all of us to just think, you know, I mean, we learn to work as professionals, and yet in certain ways we're not really like, we don't act like what you think of as professional
the
stiff,
key is,
you know?
not to act pompous.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here, capital. You know, you really got to stay humble, and you got to stay friendly, and just make people comfortable to come in. Like, it's kind of like a restaurant.
It is.
You know?
It is. And you know, that's the thing too, is a lot of what we're doing, because we are on that cusp of, you know, music and technology. But you know, you really do understand, and that's one of the things that you brought to Capital especially, was you understand that that it's a service business. You know?
Totally.
And it's a service business, but not in the sense of, I mean, yes, there are parallels with a restaurant, but at the same time, we're touching something a lot more intimate, you know? And you know, it's no wonder that intimate relationships develop in our industry so easily, because we get so naked with each other in an artistic sense.
You know, I saw all these artists come in, and I said, you know, they're not coming off stage to applause.
Right.
They're going to eat and wonder, and their food is. And I saw this wonderful nature of people just in their vulnerability, you know, and I mean, when Sting walked in the first time, I met him at the back thing to escort him down. That was really fun. Like, told the security guy, you let me know when he comes in. I didn't have a camera. I'm like, can I get a camera? I said, I have to see people come in. Like, Sound City, everybody walked by me. You know? I said, that's how I get the next job.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I rope them in. You know, so anyway, Sting came in and he said, I've always marveled at this building from afar. And I said, well, marvel no more. You're here. You know, I was like, and and we went down. He's like, you know, so because it's like, isn't it fun? Like, aren't we having fun?
And that's just it. You know, you've never lost that fun thing. You know,
thank God. Yes,
and I think that's
humor.
what opens us up to being able to, like, you know, yes, we're professional, but you know, we're not wearing lab coats here. Okay, we're not like you know,
my shop guy started wearing lab coats at the end. No, it was fun.
Yeah,
well, Dave Clark had long white hair, and he used to wear pants up to here with his shoes. It was like mad scientist look. It was funny.
Yeah. Well, and you know, all of these studios have had
characters.
The people who work in them, man, they're such characters, you know, and that's one of the things I love about this industry.
That's why you were there visiting Bruce. You know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You know?
And that's just it. There's so many
colorful characters, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not only the rock stars, it's the people around them that are
actually, you know, the reason that I started doing this show was because I realized that we are the people with the really good stories. The rock stars have stories, but we have stories about the rock stars.
Yes, exactly.
And we have better stories.
Yep.
And so
we have human people stories.
Exactly, exactly. And that's what I love about this because, you know,
that's great.
It's like
you're doing that.
You and I both, we understand that we're touching these people in a place where, you know, it's vulnerable, but it's also it's ticklish almost.
Yeah,
you know?
no, exactly. That's exactly how to put it. And you know, they're coming down with some creation, and they want it to sound the best. Like Tom Petty said in Sound City Movie, he said, "You're trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah,
you're trying to find something that someone goes down there and feels goosebumps.
Yeah,
like and you're not you know, you don't want to fake it every time, you know.
Right.
So you kind of, you know, but you really listen. And I remember Paul McCartney was playing back the record for all his band, and I was near the coffee machine down there, and he goes, "You want to come in and listen?" And I'm like, "Okay." I called the front office. I'll be gone for an hour.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
Paul wants me to listen.
Yeah, I mean,
and he played this great record, and was sitting around in the control room. That was just the band, and I'm sitting on the couch in the back, and it ended, and I'm like, "What do you say?" I mean, you say the obvious, of course, but I said, "Well, I got a buzz."
See, that's just it. You know the right thing to say.
Yeah.
And that's great,
you know? It's,
yeah.
That's from hanging around, but it's like, I can say it. And I always think before I blur, you know? So I said, I got a buzz on that, you know? Anybody else? You know? Like, oh, yeah, you know? It's like true.
But I think it's so, it's really, you know, it's fun to think that, you know, we've had.
You know, it's a blessing. Like Al Schmidt used to say, you call this work, you know?
We're so lucky.
Al was number one in his personality, his hospitality. Beautiful.
And that's just it. We're so fortunate to have been able to
live and hang around
in
like in a room with Phil Ramone and Al Schmidt and Tommy LaPuma and the jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't stop. I'm like, these guys are amazing. You know, I was amazed at these guys spending 12 hours together, like hanging out, laughing. I called it Big Boy Daycare. That's what I named it. I'm like, did you bring something to play with? Okay, go with the rest of the guys. Go have fun.
Go play.
Yeah, go play.
We have a new box you can play with, right? You know, that was always the thing too.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
It's like,
when I was in Kendon, Herbie Hancock brought in this box, Lynn.
Oh yeah.
He brought it in, and he was playing it for people, and everybody's going, a drum machine. What? All the drummers are going to be out of business. And I'm like, no. And then everybody freaked out. When I got to Sound City, everybody was like, drum machine's taking over. And I said, no, when they start hearing good drums. And that's when In the Air with the Phil Collins song came out. And that was real drums, you know. So
and they said the same thing about synthesizers,
cyclical, right?
you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny because I've had this conversation recently with people about AI stuff too, you know.
Yeah.
And like, on the one hand, you could say, oh, it's going to replace it. You know what?
Yeah.
It's not going to replace the human element.
Right. And as long as people keep the human element, and that's why I'm trying to concentrate on the youth, because they're going to grow up, they're going to become professionals in their field, and they may be able to save our business. Like if they say, I'm head of music clearance, or I'm head of this, and I want it in LA. They're the ones that are going to say it.
Yeah.
So we got to concentrate on them. And and I told the kids at the NAMM show, I said, when you get a record deal, tell them you need to do it at a major recording studio. I go, and get the experience, because you are missing so much fun.
Yeah.
Than you sending it to your friend. No, you're missing the experience that's going to enlighten you and invigorate you.
Well, it's funny.
That's what we did in the rooms. I'd intermingle rooms together, and
well, and you're talking about the whole thing that I when I taught college, one of the things that really blew me away was I said, okay, how many people in this room, in this class, have been in a band? Yeah, I taught recording in college, and I said, how many people in this room have been in a band? One person, and he had been in school band, like marching band.
Yes,
And so it's like, how do you understand when that magic's happening if you've never experienced that magic?
Yes, right. When people are playing different whatever notes and playing and just
vibing off each other and all of that.
That's what I said. I said work begets work. Like, I got asked by a supervisor, how do you know? Like, how do you get the numbers consistent?
Yeah.
I said work begets work. I said don't question the magic.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's just happens. It's lucky. It's people thinking about where they want to go and where they want to have fun. And I could see Al, or I could see Al Schmidt there, and I can have fun with. I like the staff. I want to go have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's it. But if you're just a technical world with good equipment, but no personality, they're gonna always, humans are gonna go towards the human element.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So we still get that on our side, because we are still humans, and the next generations are too.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're the ones
emotion.
that gotta fight. Yeah.
There's emotion there,
Yeah.
So let's plug a little bit. What are you doing now? Tell me about your newest venture.
Well, after my time at Universal Capital ended.
Whatever it's called this week, yeah.
Yes. I started a music consulting business. So me and Candace got hired to throw some parties. Like we did one in New York during the AES. Did you come?
I wasn't at AES this last time.
That's why you didn't come. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful condominium in Spanish Harlem, 3 floors, and music in every room, and we had the big first night AES party, and over 100 people showed up. I got the whole Met Alliance guys. He had food in the kitchen, all wine, rooftops. It was the most amazing thing. And then me and Candace, because they liked how we got asked to do the Les Paul opening party that opened up in the United front room.
Okay.
And they brought out his original console and then recorders and stuff, and we got
I've been in that room. Actually, was in that room just before NAMM.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we threw a little opening party for them and stuff like that. I've been helping out with referral studios, helping kind of what Ellis does, but not most of mine's been friendly thing, and just helping out people like that. And but now I'm going to be a consultant for LA Recording School, which is right next to Sunset Sound.
Nice.
And they have 14 rooms there. They have a great staff, and Angela Bibb, she's running the show with some other people, and it's wonderful. Angelia Bibb Shepherd, that's her name. Anyway, so she just said, why don't you do some consulting for us for the next bunch of months? And so I'm just going to open up and start calling all my friends and getting them either one to give me a studio tour for the students, or coming to visit the school and speaking and help with the, just identifying areas where they could be placed and stuff.
Okay.
So it's kind of like me going full circle.
We're definitely going to do some stuff together.
Yes.
Yes. This is
See?
now.
And we didn't even know this.
I know, right?
And you called me out of the blue.
Yeah.
And I would have did it there, but they were kind of busy, so
all good.
So we found another friend's house, But I'm excited because I really feel that's like I said. Okay, everybody becomes a consultant, but everybody also wants to give back. People want
That's
to.
It.
It's like, you can count the number of years you might be doing it on your hand. It's not like you're out of college looking for a future, but you need to help these people see the future and not be just molded by what's going on in the community now. It's there. This is where, like I've told people, I used to get these late calls at Capitol, I want to go, but my parents, and I'm like, they want me to stay in college, they want me to, but I want to go to LA, and I said, well, one thing I got to tell you is you never be braver than you are right now. I came to California when I was 20.
Yeah.
And I had $500 and no car.
I was 19 and I had even less. So yeah.
Because
I feel you.
I made outfits for a show band. I figured,
Yeah.
But it was tough, and it was, watch everything and do everything. But God provides, and things happen, and you just roll with it. But you can't let it get the best of you.
No, and the thing is, you start to realize. I mean, I realized this way later in life, but we're constantly building the bridges we walk on it.
Thank you. That's a lovely way to put it. Right, right.
I mean,
and that's what you got to know too. So you have to be nice to everybody.
Yeah.
Because those people that if you're not nice to somebody, you're going to run into them again. Like me and Candace always said, this business is very neighborly. There is it's a community.
It is.
And we're lucky. We're lucky
Yeah.
that the community that we go to these shows, we go to these AES shows and see all our friends all doing the same thing.
Yep.
And then even the women in my life have been so supportive, and I was always
really
scared,
true.
because of high school.
You are like you are like the goddesses of this industry. I mean, I love that because
That's so sweet because we stuck around.
Well, you stuck around, and also you are fearless, and when you're surrounded by a bunch of meathead guys, you have to be fearless.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved it when we were the first to do the Edna ISDN system where you could record people afar, and Phil Ramone brought that in with Frank Sinatra record.
I remember.
And I remember going over to visit A&M and Shelley Yackes and talking about it. And I had a circle of engineers just coming around, and I said, I know just enough to be dangerous. That's all, because don't ask me more. This is what I know.
But then that's the thing is, like, we all fill in the gaps for each other.
Yeah, we can carry on a conversation. Yeah.
It's like,
Talk
I got
guys,
hired as a tech at Cherokee. A month after the guy hired me, he quit. All of a sudden, it's like, we need somebody to run the tech department, and would a volunteer step forward and everyone else step back?
Yeah.
But
and
you figure it out.
You put yourself out of your and that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Like I'm a little nervous. Can I do it? My brain gonna work?
Oh, you got this.
And
you got this. Are you kidding?
And I said, but once I get going, I'm okay. But I was thinking that, because when you're not in your routine every single day, and I did it for over 30 years, and 9 years at Sound City. I know my routine, so now it's like, whoa. And I think I have to draw upon that energy of the people I'm going to be relating to.
Yeah.
College students.
And you have to also draw upon your people skills, because
right.
we're all
well, at least it's behind me. I can look back and go, oh, you come on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's something, that's interesting that you say that, because that's one of the things that I'm usually like counseling younger people about is, once in a while, take a look in the rear view and realize how far you have come.
Exactly.
Because it's also, really good for you when you're thinking like, oh, I'm a loser, whatever.
Yeah.
Then you realize, hey, all of these things that I've been through.
Yep.
You know what? It's actually I made it out okay.
Because businesses are cutting, and they're cutting the best people. I see broken-hearted, and it's just like, but you just have to keep going on and succeed. Let's see. Success is the greatest.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I'm going to conclude with the question that I ask almost everyone, and in your case, I'm just like salivating over this. Okay. So obviously the world has changed, the industry has changed. What do you tell 15-year-old you coming up now?
As much as you try to not let guys and falling, and I always tell these girls too, I said, the hardest thing about being women in this business is not falling in love with rock stars or the like, and the people around them, because then you get sideswiped. I didn't want to get pulled out or
It's
off
true for
my
men
rocker.
too. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know.
Okay. Really.
Well, because
Yeah.
we work, because as I said earlier, we work with people on such an intimate
You're
basis.
saying it right. Right.
It's like
so
you fall in love.
I probably could have been better at that. And then the other thing is, I would have just said, well, I did do that. I did try to find pianos.
Mm-hmm. What's that line from that movie with why ruin a perfectly good relationship by falling in love?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's one of those. Sounds like
Yeah.
something more. But and that's why I tried moreover to keep things professional.
Yeah.
Because I figured I want to last in this business.
Yeah.
And I don't want to create a lot of drama around myself. So I would have said just follow what your really hot was music and songwriting. Try not to get because sometimes even in loneliness you just stay at the studio because I'm not going to go home and be alone.
Yeah.
But then you could have been like playing piano. You could have been doing stuff.
Well, and that's funny because that's like, what do? We procrastinate until we can't do anything else, and it's like, all right, I guess I'll write a song.
Yeah. So and I did get a piano, even though I need to fix it. And so I do have the sewing machine, and I sing.
You still making clothes?
And I sing. Not really,
Okay.
little bit. I need you need a separate room for that. It's too much messy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
You
But it's always in my heart. But but I do sing, and my girlfriend, before she moved up north, she had a little band, and I used to sing backup. So that was fun. We used to go out in Malibu, at the Malibu Inn. Whatever. So,
yeah.
It used to be a Mexican place.
We're all always going to be frustrated musicians.
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny.
Well, the whole industry is.
Well, I was talking to, I was over at Cherokee last night, and I was talking to Bruce, and Bruce said, we should do a jam with all of the ex-Cherokee people. And I'm thinking, there's at least, 20 bass players and half a dozen drummers and
One thing Capitol was really good at, every Christmas party, they'd say every department put a band together and do Capitol songs.
Nice.
So I got to be the lead singer in that, and I did one year I did Fever in Peggy Lee style with a gown on, followed by Addicted to Love. And we had 2 drummers and stuff, and they booked the Henry Fonda theater,
Yeah.
So they actually I didn't know it. They didn't tell them. They filmed it, and then put a little DVD together.
Okay.
So yeah.
So that's available somewhere.
Yeah. That was wild. And
Okay. Can I find that on YouTube?
I don't think so. Rob's Rob was the music director, so he had to play boom, boom, boom. He had to play the bass, and I had an evening gown on with my hair up, and I had to switch it around, and I had a tube dress on underneath as Tina Turner.
Oh, okay.
I had to do Addicted to Love and rock out.
Because you had to go like quick change from one to the other?
Well, I stood and thing, and Peggy Lee become Gypsy Rose Lee. I started taking off my gloves, and I tried to take the dress off and keep the other one on, but they were kind of sticking because it was pleather. And so they had to keep playing and Jeff Minnick stood like this. He stood in back of me, and I'm like, stop, I can't get this thing. As I said, should have did the whole thing.
Okay,
I would have been famous.
We have to find this footage, okay? This has got to be freaking hilarious.
It is funny. And Rob was the greatest. We did it a couple of years in a row. And they did a Mexican bandito version of I've Got Friends in Low Places.
Oh, I love it.
In fake Mexican language. You got to ask Rob about that.
Okay.
When we see him next time, I got to invite him over to, to come see, because he wants to talk to you about.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we will.
Yes. Thank you for having such fun.
Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you.
This has been absolutely. I've been waiting for this forever.
I know.
You know that,
I was telling you. Oh, didn't we already do this? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
This is great.
Perfect timing.
I'm glad we've done this.
Of course.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Any parting words?
And just be strong, be confident, and be nice.
Ooh. Okay. I love it.
Because if you're strong and you're going to be nice, they counteract each other. You can't.
Well, now you've managed to do both. Okay.
Yes.
You've managed to be, and that's like I said.
Thanks.
That's what we
good.
all love about you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm honored.
She's honored, and we're out. Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.